Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire galactic civilization makes the fatal mistake of judging someone by their appearance? When a most advanced alien species in the universe looks at a quiet, unremarkable human janitor and sees nothing but weakness? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a man who swept floors on the most prestigious space station in known space, invisible to the powerful beings around him. They saw his humble work clothes, his soft-spoken manner, his simple job, and dismissed him as insignificant. They had no idea they were looking at someone whose true identity would shake the very foundations of their reality. What they didn't know was that this unassuming janitor had once been something else entirely. Someone else entirely. And when push came to shove, when innocent lives hung in the balance, the mask would come off. The truth would emerge. And these alien overlords would learn the hardest lesson of their lives. Never, ever underestimate a human being. Some secrets are worth keeping. Some identities are worth hiding. But when evil threatens everything you've sworn to protect, sometimes the only choice is to reveal who you really are, no matter the cost. Get ready for a story that will remind you why humanity earned its place among the stars, and why even the mightiest civilizations should think twice before dismissing the quiet ones who clean up after them. Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the gleaming corridors of Nexus Prime, the most important space station in the known galaxy. His worn work boots made soft, squeaking sounds against the polished metal floor. The aliens who passed him barely glanced in his direction. To them, he was just part of the background, as invisible as the air they breathed. The station bustled with activity around the clock. Tall, elegant Altarians with their silver skin and flowing robes discussed trade agreements in melodic voices. Stocky Corvin ambassadors, covered in thick scales and speaking in deep, rumbling tones, argued over territorial disputes. Delicate Zephyrian delegates, barely 3 feet tall, with gossamer wings, fluttered between meetings about scientific exchanges. Marcus understood every word they said. His translation implant was standard issue for all station workers. But what the aliens didn't know was that he spoke most of their languages fluently without any technological help. He had learned them the hard way, through years of necessity in places these pampered diplomats couldn't imagine. But none of them saw him as anything more than a janitor, which was exactly how he wanted it. Human. The sharp voice cut through the ambient chatter. Marcus looked up to see Commander Thexvar, a particularly arrogant Corvin military officer, pointing one clawed finger at him. Clean this mess immediately. The Corvin had deliberately knocked over a container of exotic fruit from his homeworld, sending sticky purple juice splashing across the floor. Several other aliens chuckled at the display. It was a common form of entertainment among the more prejudiced species, making the human servants jump to clean up messes they created on purpose. Marcus simply nodded and reached for his mop. Right away, sir. He had endured worse humiliations than this. Much worse. A little spilled juice was nothing compared to some of the things he had seen in his previous life. The life no one here knew about. As he cleaned, Marcus listened to the conversations swirling around him. The Altarian trade delegation was nervous about something. They kept mentioning unusual ship movements in the outer systems. The Corvin military officers were dismissive, insisting their fleet could handle any threat. The Zephyrians seemed genuinely worried, their usual cheerful demeanor replaced by hushed, anxious whispers. Marcus, my friend, a warm voice called out in heavily accented standard. Marcus looked up to see Dr. Yuki Tanaka approaching, one of the few humans who held a position of respect on the station. The elderly xenobiologist had been studying alien physiology for decades and was considered one of the galaxy's leading experts on interspecies medicine. Good morning, Dr. Tanaka, Marcus replied, straightening up from his cleaning. The older man smiled kindly. I keep telling you, call me Yuki. We're both a long way from Earth. He glanced around at the various alien species conducting their business. Though I suppose some of us feel more at home here than others. Marcus had always appreciated Dr. Tanaka's kindness. The man treated him like a human being, not just a cleaning service. It was a rare experience on Nexus Prime. Have you heard the rumors? Dr. Tanaka asked quietly, stepping closer. About the ships gathering in the Vega system? Marcus paused in his work. He had heard more than rumors. His enhanced hearing and observational skills, honed through years of training most people would never survive, had picked up fragments of classified communications. But he couldn't reveal that level of awareness without raising questions he wasn't prepared to answer. I hear bits and pieces, he said carefully. The Altarians seemed concerned. Dr. Tanaka nodded grimly. They should be. Word is that the Drakari Imperium is moving ships toward the border worlds. If that's true, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew what the Drakari were capable of. The Drakari Imperium was a collection of warrior species that had been expanding aggressively for the past century. They believed in the absolute supremacy of the strong over the weak. Entire civilizations have been enslaved or wiped out when they failed to meet Drakari standards of strength and usefulness. They particularly despised what they saw as soft species, those who value diplomacy over warfare, cooperation over conquest. Humans, unfortunately, fell squarely into that category in their eyes. I should get back to work, Marcus said, though he remained alert to every conversation happening around them. Of course. But Marcus? Dr. Tanaka placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. If things get bad here, don't try to be a hero. Find somewhere safe and stay there. The galaxy has seen enough good people die because they couldn't walk away from fight. If only he knew, Marcus thought as the doctor walked away. Walking away from fights was something Marcus Chun had never been good at. In fact, it was something Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran Special Forces had been specifically trained never to do. But that was another life, another identity, one he had buried so deeply that sometimes he almost forgot it himself. The cleaning cart's wheels squeaked again as he made his way toward the residential quarters. The sound had become oddly comforting over the past 2 years. It marked the rhythm of his days, the steady progression from one task to the next. It was peaceful in a way his old life had never been. As he passed the main observation deck, Marcus paused to look out at the stars. Nexus Prime sat at the intersection of major space lanes, making it a perfect diplomatic meeting point. Ships from dozens of different species came and went daily, their various designs reflecting the cultures that created them. Sleek Altarian vessels that looked like swimming creatures from an alien ocean. Massive, block-like Corvin dreadnoughts bristling with weapons. Tiny Zephyrian scouts that darted between the larger ships like insects. And, occasionally, the utilitarian gray hulls of human ships. Earth's vessels were generally considered ugly and primitive by alien standards. No artistic flourishes, no elegant curves. Just functional designs built for reliability and endurance. Marcus had always found a certain beauty in that simplicity. A flash of movement caught his eye. Far in the distance, almost at the edge of sensor range, something large and dark was moving between the outer planets of the system. The station's automated systems would have detected it, but they were programmed to ignore anything that didn't approach within a certain distance or transmit threatening signals. Marcus's enhanced vision, another gift from his previous life, picked out details that the aliens around him would miss. The ship, and he was certain it was a ship, had the angular, aggressive lines typical of Drakari vessels. It was conducting a passive scan of the system, gathering intelligence while staying just outside the official detection grid. The rumors Dr. Tanaka had mentioned were more than rumors. The Drakari were coming. Marcus felt a familiar stirring in his chest. It was the feeling he used to get before a mission, when lives hung in the balance and failure wasn't an option. It was the feeling he had tried so hard to bury when he took on his current identity. He forced himself to keep pushing the cleaning cart. Whatever was coming, it wasn't his problem anymore. He had earned his peace, bought it with blood and sacrifice and years of service that had cost him everything he once cared about. He was Marcus Chun the janitor now, not Captain Chun the soldier. His fighting days were over. But as he continued his rounds, He couldn't shake the image of that distant ship. And, more importantly, he couldn't stop thinking about the thousands of innocent beings on Nexus Prime who had no idea what was heading their way. The station's artificial day cycle was beginning its evening phase when the first alarm sounded. It wasn't the harsh klaxon of a general emergency, just the soft chime that indicated an incoming priority communication. Marcus was restocking supply closets in the diplomatic quarters when he heard Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Confederation addressing the station commander over the public address system. Commander Brixton, we have received disturbing reports from our border worlds. 3 of our colonies have gone silent in the past 48 hours. Long-range sensors detected Drakari fleet elements in those systems shortly before contact was lost. The station commander, a pragmatic Corvin named Brixton who had earned his position through competence rather than politics, responded with characteristic bluntness. Ambassador, the Drakari Imperium has no treaty obligations that prevent them from conducting military operations in disputed systems. Unless they threaten Nexus Prime directly, we cannot take action. You don't understand. Ambassador Veltar's voice carried a note of desperation that made Marcus stop what he was doing. These weren't military installations. They were civilian colonies. Families, children, research stations. The Drakari don't take prisoners from inferior species. If they've attacked our worlds. The communication ended abruptly, leaving an uncomfortable silence that seemed to spread throughout the station. Marcus could hear the murmur of worried conversations starting up in a dozen different languages. He finished restocking the supply closet and made his way toward the command center. Maintenance personnel had access to most areas of the station, and Marcus had made sure to maintain his reputation as a quiet, efficient worker who could be trusted not to interfere with important business. The command center was buzzing with activity when he arrived. Officers from various species were bent over sensor displays and communication consoles, their voices tense with concern. Marcus began emptying trash bins and cleaning work surfaces, making himself as invisible as possible while absorbing every scrap of information he could gather. Long-range sensors confirm it. Zephyrian technician was reporting to Commander Brixton. Drakari fleet elements, approximately 50 vessels, moving along the Kepler trade route. They'll reach the junction point in approximately 6 hours. That puts them less than a day from Nexus Prime, another officer observed nervously. Commander Brixton's scaled face remained impassive. The Drakari have every right to use established trade routes. We will monitor their approach and respond appropriately if they deviate from standard navigation protocols. Marcus almost smiled at the commander's faith in established protocols. The Drakari Imperium had a long history of ignoring galactic law when it suited their purposes. Protocol meant nothing to beings who believed that might made right, and that the weak deserved whatever fate the strong chose to give them. As he continued his cleaning, Marcus processed the tactical situation. 50 Drakari ships was a significant force, probably including at least a dozen heavy cruisers and multiple fighter squadrons. Nexus Prime's defenses consisted of a handful of patrol craft and a modest shield array designed to protect against pirates and small raiders, not a full military assault. If the Drakari decided to attack, the station wouldn't last an hour. The smart thing to do would be to find passage on one of the civilian transports that were sure to start leaving soon. Marcus had enough save credits to buy his way on almost any ship, and his maintenance credentials would make him a useful crew member for vessels that weren't too particular about background checks. He could be gone before the shooting started. Safe, anonymous, forgotten. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made him feel sick. Marcus looked around the command center at the beings working frantically to make sense of an impossible situation. Dr. Tanaka was consulting with the medical staff about emergency triage procedures. Ambassador Veltar was trying desperately to contact other Altarian settlements that might be in danger. Commander Brixton was doing his best to maintain order while dealing with reports that grew more ominous by the hour. They were good people, most of them. Flawed, certainly. Some were arrogant or prejudiced or small-minded. But They didn't deserve to be slaughtered by Drakari warriors who saw alien species as either useful slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. Marcus finished cleaning and pushed his cart toward the exit, his mind racing. He had built his new identity carefully, creating a perfect cover that would let him live peacefully for the rest of his life. Revealing who he really was would destroy all of that. Once the galaxy knew that Captain Marcus Chun was alive, there would be no going back to the quiet life of a station janitor. But some things were more important than personal peace. As he walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, Marcus began to shed the careful mannerisms he had adopted over the past 2 years. His posture straightened slightly. His stride became more purposeful. His eyes, which had spent so long looking at floors and walls, began to scan his environment with the calculating gaze of a tactical analyst. By the time he reached his small quarters in the maintenance section, Marcus Chin the janitor was already beginning to fade away. What emerged in his place was something the Drakari Imperium had spent years trying to kill, and something the beings of Nexus Prime were about to discover they desperately needed. The galaxy's most dangerous war had just come looking for a fight. It was about to get one. Marcus sealed the door to his quarters and moved with swift efficiency to the small storage compartment hidden behind his clothing unit. His fingers found the concealed latch, and the panel slid aside to reveal a space that officially didn't exist. Inside lay the carefully preserved remnants of his former life. The first item he retrieved was a military-grade communication device, far more sophisticated than anything a station janitor should possess. Its quantum encryption capabilities could punch through most forms of interference and jamming, a necessity for operations behind enemy lines. Marcus activated it and began scanning classified military frequencies, his security clearances still valid despite his supposed death 2 years ago. What he found confirmed his worst fears. The Altarian colonies hadn't just been attacked. They had been systematically destroyed. The Drakari hadn't bothered with conquering or enslaving the populations. They had simply eliminated them, testing new weapons and tactics in preparation for something much larger. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing the tactical situation across 3-star systems. The Drakari fleet movements formed a clear pattern when viewed from a strategic perspective. This wasn't a raid or a territorial dispute. It was the opening phase of a major offensive, and Nexus Prime sat directly in the path of their advance. The second item he removed from the hidden compartment was a sealed case containing his old uniform, the black and silver of Terran Special Forces, with the distinctive insignia that had struck fear into enemy commanders across the galaxy. Marcus ran his fingers over the fabric, remembering the weight of the responsibility it represented. He had been Captain Marcus Chun, leader of Delta Squadron, the most elite unit in human space. Their missions took them to places where conventional forces couldn't go, against enemies that regular soldiers couldn't face. They specialized in impossible rescues, deep reconnaissance, and surgical strikes against targets that could change the course of wars. Delta Squadron had been humanity's answer to the galaxy's worst nightmares. And Marcus had been their answer to problems that seemed unsolvable. But that was before the mission that destroyed everything. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself remember what he had spent 2 years trying to forget. The emergency distress call from the research station on Kepler, 442b. The scientists trapped by a Drakari advance force that had somehow penetrated deep into human space. The race against time to evacuate civilian researchers before the main enemy fleet arrived. Delta Squadron had reached the station with hours to spare. The evacuation should have been routine, the kind of operation they had performed dozens of times before. But the intelligence had been wrong. The Drakari hadn't sent an advance force. They had sent Warlord Thaxmore himself. Thaxmore was the Imperium's greatest military commander, a being whose tactical genius was matched only by his absolute cruelty. He had never lost a battle, never failed to achieve his objectives, never shown mercy to those who stood against him. The research station had been bait in a trap designed specifically to destroy Delta Squadron. Marcus remembered the moment when their transport was hit by Drakari plasma fire, spinning out of control toward the planet's surface. He remembered his team fighting desperately to protect the civilian evacuees while under attack from 3 directions. He remembered making the hardest decision of his life when it became clear they couldn't save everyone. He had ordered his team to prioritize the children. 18 adult researchers died because of that decision. 18 brilliant minds who could have contributed years of valuable work to the galaxy's knowledge base. Marcus carried their names in his memory, along with the weight of every choice that had led to their deaths. But 43 people lived because of that same decision. 43 lives saved by men and women who gave everything to protect them. The rest of Delta Squadron hadn't survived the battle. Marcus had been the only one to make it to the escape pod, critically wounded and haunted by the faces of his fallen team. The official reports listed him as killed in action, another casualty of Warlord Thaxmore's tactical brilliance. He had let them believe it. The guilt and trauma of losing his entire unit had left him broken in ways that medical science couldn't heal. Taking on the identity of a simple maintenance worker on a remote space station had seemed like the only way to find peace. But peace was a luxury the galaxy couldn't afford anymore. Marcus put on his old uniform, feeling the familiar weight of the armored fabric settle into place. Hidden pockets contained emergency medical supplies, combat stimulants, and micro-tools that could serve a dozen different purposes. The uniform's integrated systems came online automatically, linking with his enhanced physiology to provide tactical data, threat assessment, and communication capabilities. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt like himself again. The third item in the hidden compartment was his service weapon, a custom plasma rifle that had been his constant companion through 47 successful missions. The weapon recognized his biometric signature and activated with a soft hum, its power cells fully charged and ready for combat. Marcus attached the rifle's strap to his shoulder and checked the remaining contents of his hiding place. Emergency rations, medical supplies, and a data core containing classified information about Drakari tactics and capabilities. Everything he would need to become a one-man army. But first, he needed intelligence about the current situation. Marcus activated his communication device and began systematically hacking into Nexus Prime's security network. His access codes were years out of date, but his training included advanced techniques for infiltrating computer systems without triggering security protocols. What he found made his blood run cold. The Drakari fleet had accelerated their approach. Instead of 6 hours, they would reach the system in less than 3. Moreover, they weren't following standard navigation protocols. They were moving in a combat formation designed for planetary assault, not peaceful transit. Warlord Thaxmore was coming to finish what he had started 2 years ago. Marcus pulled up the station's defensive capabilities and felt his heart sink. The shields were civilian-grade, designed to deflect asteroids and cosmic radiation. The weapon systems consisted of a handful of point defense turrets meant to discourage small raiders. Against a full Drakari battle fleet, Nexus Prime might as well be defenseless. But the station did have one advantage that its designers probably never intended. Marcus accessed the architectural databases and smiled grimly as he studied the station's layout. Nexus Prime had been built using human engineering principles, with redundant systems and modular construction that prioritized survival over aesthetics. The aliens who lived here saw it as ugly and utilitarian, but Marcus recognized it as something else entirely. It was a fortress that didn't know it was a fortress. Hidden in the structural support systems were emergency bulkheads that could seal entire sections. The power grid had multiple redundancies that would allow isolated areas to function independently. The life support systems were designed to maintain atmosphere, even with significant hull breaches. Most importantly, the maintenance tunnels and service corridors formed a network that would allow someone with the right knowledge to move throughout the station without being detected. Marcus had spent 2 years learning every passage, every access point, every hidden route that connected one section to another. If the Drakari managed to board Nexus Prime, they would find themselves fighting an enemy who knew the terrain better than they knew their own ships. But first, Marcus needed to prepare the battlefield. He gathered his equipment and made his way through the maintenance passages toward the station's critical systems. His enhanced reflexes and tactical training guided him through routes that would keep him away from security cameras and public areas. The beings of Nexus Prime were about to discover that their invisible janitor was anything but helpless. Marcus's first stop was the primary power distribution center. The massive chamber hummed with energy conduits that fed power to every system on the station. Under normal circumstances, the area was restricted to senior engineering personnel. But Marcus had been cleaning here for 2 years, and the automated security systems recognized him as authorized maintenance staff. Working quickly, Marcus began installing modifications to the power grid. His micro tools allowed him to access control circuits and add new pathways that weren't included in the original schematics. To anyone reviewing the systems later, it would look like routine maintenance upgrades. In reality, he was creating the ability to selectively shut down power to specific areas of the station while maintaining life support and defensive systems. If the Drakari boarded Nexus Prime, they would find themselves fighting in darkness while Marcus retained full control over his environment. His second stop was the communications array. Marcus needed to send a message, but it couldn't be traced back to him. Using his military-grade communication device, he prepared a coded transmission that would reach Earth Command through quantum relay networks. The message was simple: Thaxmore moving on Nexus Prime. Request immediate reinforcement. Delta 77 active. Delta 77 was his old call sign, supposedly lost with the rest of his squadron. Using it would tell Earth Command exactly who was sending the message and how serious the threat was. Human reinforcements were at least 12 hours away, but any warning was better than none. As he transmitted the message, Marcus felt a familiar weight settle over him. He was no longer a janitor trying to live peacefully on a remote station. He was once again Captain Marcus Chun, and he had work to do. His third stop took him to the station's armory. Security here was much tighter, but Marcus's maintenance credentials gave him access to the storage areas adjacent to the main weapon lockers. More importantly, he knew where the emergency caches were located. Nexus Prime's designers had followed human military doctrine by placing hidden weapon and supply caches throughout the station. In theory, these were meant to support security personnel during extended emergencies. In practice, they were perfectly positioned to support guerrilla operations against boarding parties. Marcus accessed the nearest cache and smiled as he inventoried its contents. Plasma rifles, explosive charges, medical supplies, and combat armor. Everything he would need to make the Drakari Imperium regret their decision to threaten innocent civilians. But weapons were only part of the solution. Marcus needed allies, and he needed them to be ready for what was coming. He made his way to Dr. Tanaka's laboratory, using service corridors to avoid the main passages where panic was beginning to spread. Word of the approaching Drakari fleet had leaked despite official attempts to maintain calm, and various species were reacting with predictable fear and confusion. Dr. Tanaka was working frantically to prepare medical supplies when Marcus knocked on his door. The elderly scientist looked up in surprise, then did a double take as he registered Marcus's appearance. "My friend," Dr. Tanaka said slowly, "you look different." Marcus stepped inside and sealed the door behind him. "Dr. Tanaka, I need you to listen carefully. In approximately 2.5 hours, this station is going to come under attack by a Drakari battle fleet. The official defenses won't be enough to stop them." "How could you possibly know?" Dr. Tanaka began, then stopped as he really looked at Marcus for the first time. The bearing, the equipment, the unmistakable confidence of a professional soldier. "Who are you really?" "Someone who's going to make sure you and everyone else on this station survives the next 24 hours, Marcus replied. "But I need your help." Dr. Tanaka stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Marcus felt a surge of relief. He had been right to trust the doctor's character. First, I need you to prepare for mass casualties. The Drakari don't believe in clean, surgical strikes. When they board this station, it's going to be brutal. Board the station? Dr. Tanaka's face went pale. Surely the commander won't let it come to that. Commander Brixton is a good officer, but he's never faced anything like Warlord Thaxmore, Marcus explained. The Drakari commander doesn't just win battles. He studies his enemies, learns their weaknesses, and exploits them with surgical precision. He's been planning this attack since the moment he learned about Nexus Prime's strategic importance. Marcus moved to the doctor's computer terminal and pulled up tactical displays showing the approaching fleet. This isn't a random raid or a territorial dispute. Thaxmore is testing defenses and gathering intelligence for a larger offensive. Nexus Prime is going to be his proving ground. Dr. Tanaka studied the displays with growing horror. There are families here, children, civilian researchers who have never seen combat. Which is why I need your help, Marcus said. You know this station better than almost anyone, and people trust you. When the fighting starts, they're going to need someone to coordinate medical care and evacuations. The doctor straightened, and Marcus saw the steel beneath his kindly exterior. Tell me what you need. Marcus spent the next hour briefing Dr. Tanaka on emergency procedures and evacuation routes. The doctor proved to be an excellent student, asking intelligent questions and grasping the tactical situation with surprising speed. There's something else, Marcus said as they finished their planning. The Drakari have a psychological warfare protocol they use against inferior species. They'll try to break morale by targeting civilians and non-combatants first. When that starts, I need you to make sure everyone understands that surrender isn't an option. What do you mean? Marcus's expression darkened. The Drakari don't take prisoners from species they consider weak. They see mercy as a form of contamination. Anyone who surrenders to them will be killed, probably slowly and publicly, to terrorize the survivors. Dr. Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. You've fought them before. Yes, Marcus replied simply. And I've seen what they do to people who can't fight back. The older man nodded grimly. Then, we'll have to make sure we can fight back. As Marcus prepared to leave, Dr. Tanaka caught his arm. Captain Shun, he said quietly, somehow intuiting the title that belonged with the man he was really speaking to. Thank you for telling me the truth. Marcus felt a ghost of a smile cross his face. Thank you for believing it. He left Dr. Tanaka to his preparations and made his way toward the command center. Commander Brixton needed to know what he was really facing, even if Marcus couldn't reveal how he had come by his intelligence. The corridors of Nexus Prime were beginning to show signs of the panic that was spreading through the civilian population. Aliens clustered in small groups, speaking in worried whispers about evacuation plans and defense preparations. Some were already heading toward the docking bays, hoping to secure passage on outbound transports. Marcus felt a familiar surge of protective anger as he watched families trying to comfort frightened children. These people had done nothing to deserve the fate that was heading toward them. Their only crime was being in the wrong place when Warlord Thaxmore decided to make a statement about Drakari supremacy. But they weren't defenseless. Not anymore. Marcus reached the command center to find it in organized chaos. Officers from a dozen different species were coordinating evacuation efforts while trying to assess the station's defensive capabilities. Commander Brixton stood at the center of it all, his scaled face grim as he processed reports that grew worse by the hour. Commander, Marcus called out, approaching with the confident stride of a military officer rather than the shuffling gait of a janitor. Brixton looked up, then froze as he registered Marcus's appearance. What is this? How did a maintenance worker gain access to military equipment? Because I'm not a maintenance worker, Marcus replied calmly. I'm Captain Marcus Chun, Terran Special Forces. And in approximately 90 minutes, Warlord Thaxmore is going to attack this station with everything he has. The command center fell silent as every officer turned to stare at the human who had just claimed to be one of the most decorated soldiers in the galaxy. Commander Brickstun's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion to dawning recognition. Captain Chun died 2 years ago, he said slowly. Killed in action during the Kepler incident. The reports were premature, Marcus replied. And right now, that's the only reason any of us have a chance of surviving what's coming. He stepped forward to the main tactical display and began highlighting key points in the approaching fleet formation. Thaxmore isn't just bringing firepower. He's bringing specialists. Shock troops trained for station assault, technical experts who could disable our systems, and psychological warfare units designed to break civilian morale. How could you possibly know? Because I've studied his methods for years, Marcus interrupted. Because I've fought him before, and because I'm the only person on this station who has any chance of stopping him. Commander Brickston was quiet for a long moment, weighing the impossible choice between trusting a supposedly dead human soldier and facing the galaxy's most dangerous military commander with conventional forces. Finally, he made his decision. What do you need? Commander Brickston's question hung in the air as Marcus stepped fully into his role as a military strategist. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The quiet janitor was gone, replaced by an officer whose very presence commanded respect and attention. First, we evacuate all non-essential personnel. Marcus began, highlighting sections of the station on the tactical display. But we don't use the main docking bays. Thaxmore will target those first to prevent escapes and trap people inside. We use the maintenance shuttles and cargo pods instead. A Zephyrian communications officer raised a delicate hand. Sir, the maintenance craft aren't equipped for long-range travel. Where the evacuees go. Marcus smiled grimly. They don't need to go far. Just far enough. He zoomed the display out to show the surrounding system. There's an asteroid mining facility about 6 hours away at maximum burn. It's automated, minimal life support, but it's off the main shipping lanes. The Drakari will ignore it. Commander Brickston nodded slowly. That could work. But what about the people we can't evacuate? This station has a population of 15,000. Which brings us to the second part of the plan, Marcus continued. We turn Nexus Prime into the worst possible place for the Drakari to be. They're expecting a quick, clean victory against a defenseless target. Instead, they're going to get a nightmare. Marcus pulled up the station's structural schematics and began marking key locations. The Drakari tactical doctrine relies on overwhelming force applied to critical points. They'll try to take the command center, the power grid, and the life support systems in the first wave. But those systems have been designed with human engineering principles. He highlighted the redundant power networks he had been modifying. We can isolate sections of the station and force them to fight for every corridor. Their advantage in numbers becomes meaningless if they can only bring a few troops to bear at any given time. A Corvin security chief leaned forward. Captain Chun, with all due respect, you're talking about a few dozen security officers against battle-hardened Drakari warriors. The mathematics don't support a successful defense. You're right, Marcus acknowledged, which is why we're not going to fight a conventional defense. We're going to fight a guerrilla war. He turned to address the room full of officers. Every one of you knows this station better than the Drakari do. You know where the access tunnels lead, which passages connect to others, where the emergency supplies are stored. That knowledge is a weapon, and we're going to use it. Marcus began outlining his strategy, and the assembled officers listened with growing amazement. This wasn't the desperate plan of someone hoping to delay the inevitable. This was a comprehensive military operation designed by someone who understood both the enemy's strengths and their weaknesses. The Drakari have never fought humans on our own terms, Marcus explained. They're used to enemies who stand and fight, who meet force with force. They don't understand asymmetric warfare, and they certainly don't understand how to fight an enemy that refuses to be where they expect. Dr. Tanaka entered the command center as Marcus was explaining the medical evacuation procedures. The elderly scientist had traded his usual lab coat for emergency medical gear, and his expression was grim but determined. "Doctor," Commander Brixton acknowledged him. "I trust Captain Chun has briefed you on the situation?" "He has," Dr. Tanaka replied. "Medical stations are being prepared in the designated safe areas, and I've instructed my staff on trauma procedures for Drakari weapon effects. We're as ready as we can be." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for the old man's steady competence. Having allies he could trust would make all the difference in what was coming. "Captain," the Zephyrian communications officer called out. "Long-range sensors are detecting acceleration from the Drakari fleet. Estimated time to system entry, 47 minutes. Right on schedule," Marcus muttered. "Commander, we need to start the evacuation now. Every minute we delay means more people trapped when the shooting starts." Brixton nodded and began issuing orders to his staff. The command center erupted into controlled activity as officers coordinated with various departments throughout the station. It was controlled chaos, but it was progress. Marcus pulled Dr. Tanaka aside as the evacuation began. "Doctor, I need you to know something. When the Drakari board this station, they're going to specifically target medical personnel." "What?" Dr. Tanaka's face paled. "Why would they attack doctors?" "Because Warlord Thaxmore studies his enemies," Marcus explained. "He knows the humans value the preservation of life above almost everything else. Attacking medical personnel serves two purposes. It demoralizes the defenders, and it eliminates the people who might save lives he wants to see lost." The older man was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "You're asking me to be bait." "I'm asking you to be careful," Marcus corrected. "But yes, you and your staff will be targets. The medical stations need to be in areas that can be defended, and you need to be prepared to move quickly if your position is compromised." Dr. Tanaka straightened his shoulders. "I understand, Captain. My people know the risks." As the doctor returned to his preparations, Marcus turned his attention to the station's security systems. The defensive weapons were woefully inadequate for what was coming, but they weren't completely useless. Properly positioned and coordinated, they could at least make the Drakari pay for their victory. Security Chief Corduth, he called to the Corvin officer who had questioned his tactics earlier. "I need access to the weapon control systems." The security chief hesitated. "Captain, those systems are classified. I don't have authorization." "Chief," Commander Brixton interrupted. "Give Captain Chun whatever he needs. We're past the point of worrying about regulations." Marcus spent the next 20 minutes reprogramming the station's defensive arrays. Instead of trying to engage the Drakari fleet directly, he configured the weapons to create overlapping fields of fire in the docking bays and main corridors. When the enemy boarded, they would find themselves walking into carefully prepared kill zones. But the real key to his strategy wasn't the weapons or the defensive positions. It was intelligence. Marcus activated his military communication device and began tapping into every sensor array on the station. Security cameras, environmental monitors, even the maintenance robots. Everything became part of an integrated intelligence network that would track enemy movement throughout Nexus Prime. "Captain Chun," the communications officer reported, "I'm detecting quantum transmissions from the approaching fleet. They're using military-grade encryption, but the transmission pattern suggests coordination between multiple ship commanders." "Can you break the encryption?" Marcus asked. "Not with our equipment. The Drakari use quantum-entangled communication keys that change every few minutes." Marcus smiled. "You can't break the encryption, but you can map the transmission patterns. Show me which ships are talking to which other ships." Working together, they created a real-time display of the communication network within the Drakari fleet. To Marcus's experienced eye, it revealed something crucial: the command structure. There, he pointed to a massive dreadnought at the center of the formation. "That's Thaxmore's flagship. All tactical communications are flowing through that ship." Commander Brixton studied the display. "What does that tell us?" "It tells us that Thaxmore is micromanaging this operation," Marcus replied. "He's not trusting his subordinate commanders to make independent decisions. That's both a strength and a weakness." How is centralized command a weakness? Marcus's smile was cold. Because if we can disrupt his communications, we can turn his entire fleet into a collection of individual ships acting without coordination. And individual ships can be defeated. The station shuddered slightly as the first Drakari ships entered the outer edge of the system. Long-range sensors showed the enemy fleet moving in perfect formation, their approach calculated to maximize intimidation while maintaining tactical flexibility. Time to contact, 12 minutes, the sensor operator reported. Marcus keyed his communication device to the station's public address system. His voice echoed through every corridor, reaching every being still aboard Nexus Prime. Attention, all personnel. This is Captain Marcus Chun, Terran Special Forces. In approximately 10 minutes, this station will come under attack by Drakari military forces. Do not panic, do not surrender, and do not give up hope. His words carried the absolute confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before and survived. Throughout the station, aliens who had been consumed with fear began to straighten their shoulders and steel their resolve. The Drakari believe that we are weak because we value life over conquest, cooperation over domination. They believe that we will break at the first sign of serious resistance. They are wrong. Today, we show them exactly how wrong they are. Marcus looked around the command center at the beings who had chosen to stay and fight rather than flee. Different species, different backgrounds, but united by a common determination to protect their home and each other. For those of you who have never been in combat, remember this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You're not soldiers, but you're not helpless. Trust in your training, trust in each other, and trust in the fact that we are fighting for something worth preserving. The first Drakari ships appeared on the short-range sensors, their angular hulls bristling with weapons designed for close-quarters destruction. Marcus felt the familiar pre-battle calm settle over him as his enhanced reflexes and tactical implants began processing the flood of incoming data. "Commander Brixton," he said quietly, "transfer tactical command to me." The Corvan officer hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Done. The station is yours, Captain." Marcus stepped up to the main tactical console and felt the weight of command settle around him like an old coat. Thousands of lives depended on the decisions he would make in the next few hours. It was a responsibility he had tried to leave behind, but some obligations transcended personal choice. "All stations, report readiness," he ordered. Evacuation teams report 70% of non-essential personnel successfully departed, came the first response. Medical stations established and standing by, Dr. Tanaka's voice added. Security teams in position at designated defensive points, Security Chief Cordith reported. Engineering reports all modified systems operational, the chief engineer confirmed. Marcus nodded as each department confirmed their readiness. Nexus Prime wasn't a military installation, but the beings aboard her were about to prove that determination and proper leadership could overcome almost any disadvantage. The main screen flickered as the first Drakari transmission reached the station. The image that appeared showed Warlord Thaxmore himself, a being whose mere presence commanded attention and inspired fear in equal measure. The Drakari commander was larger than most of his species, his reptilian features marked by scars that told the story of 1,000 battles. His black armor was adorned with trophies taken from defeated enemies, and his yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator studying potential prey. "I am Warlord Thaxmore of the Drakari Imperium." His voice boomed through the station's communication systems. "You occupy a strategic position that the Imperium requires. You have one option: immediate and unconditional surrender." Marcus activated the transmission system and faced the alien warlord who had haunted his nightmares for 2 years. "This is Captain Marcus Chun, commanding Nexus Prime. Your terms are rejected." Thaxmore's expression shifted to one of delighted surprise. "Captain Chun, how interesting. My intelligence reports indicated that you were killed during our last encounter." "Your intelligence was wrong. Marcus replied calmly. As it will be again. The Drakari commander leaned forward, his scarred features twisting into something that might have been a smile. Do you really think you can repeat your previous performance with a space station full of civilians instead of your special forces team? I think, Marcus said quietly, that you're about to learn the difference between fighting humans who are running away and fighting humans who are defending their home. Thaxmore's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. Excellent. I was hoping you would provide proper entertainment before your inevitable defeat. I will take great pleasure in adding your head to my collection. You're welcome to try, Marcus replied, and cut the transmission. The command center was silent for a moment as the implications of the exchange sank in. These two military commanders knew each other, had fought before, and both understood that this would be a personal battle as much as a tactical one. Contact in 90 seconds, the sensor operator announced. Marcus activated the station's defensive systems and felt the familiar surge of combat adrenaline flood his system. All stations stand by for enemy contact. The first Drakari ships swept past the station's outer perimeter, their weapons systems coming online in perfect synchronization. Marcus watched their approach with the calculating eye of a professional, noting their formation, their speed, and the way they positioned themselves to maximize their firepower advantage. Beginning bombardment run, the tactical officer reported. The first enemy salvo lit up the darkness of space as dozens of plasma cannons opened fire simultaneously. Nexus Prime shields flared to life, absorbing what damage they could, but Marcus knew they wouldn't hold for long against a sustained assault. Return fire, he ordered. Target the lead escorts, not the capital ships. The station's defensive weapons opened up, their focused fire catching the Drakari escort vessels by surprise. Two of the smaller ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, while a third was sent spinning out of control with its weapon systems destroyed. Direct hit, the tactical officer reported. Enemy formation is adjusting to compensate. But Marcus was already moving to the next phase of his plan. All teams prepare for boarding action. They'll try to take us with Marines now that they know we can fight back. The second wave of enemy fire hammered the station's shields, finally overwhelming the defensive arrays and allowing plasma bolts to strike the hull directly. Atmosphere vented from several breach sections, but the emergency bulkheads Marcus had prepared sealed automatically to prevent catastrophic decompression. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, the damage control officer reported. No casualties, emergency systems responding normally. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction as his preparations proved their worth. The Drakari were expecting a quick, easy victory. Instead, they were finding an enemy that had anticipated their tactics and prepared accordingly. Captain, the communications officer called out. I'm detecting Drakari boarding craft launching from the main fleet. Marcus nodded. The real battle was about to begin. The first Drakari boarding craft struck Nexus Prime like meteors, their armored hulls designed to punch through station defenses and deliver shock troops directly into the heart of enemy territory. Marcus watched their approach on the tactical display, counting 12 assault pods heading for strategic targets throughout the station. Contact in 30 seconds, the sensor operator announced. They're targeting the main docking bays, the power distribution center, and the command section. Marcus keyed his communication device to reach all defensive teams. All units, remember your briefings. Let them land, let them deploy, then hit them when they think they're secure. Make them pay for every meter. The first impact shook the entire station as a Drakari assault pod smashed through the hull of Docking Bay 7. Emergency alarms shrieked as atmosphere rushed out through the breach, but the automated systems sealed the surrounding sections before the damage could spread. Boarding action initiated in Docking Bay 7, Security Chief Cordith reported. Enemy forces deploying in formation. Marcus pulled up the security feed from the affected area and watched as Drakari shock troops emerged from their assault pod. They moved with the disciplined precision of elite warriors, their black armor gleaming under the emergency lighting as they secured the immediate area prepared to advance. These weren't the arrogant, overconfident raiders that many species associated with the Dracari Imperium. These were professional soldiers, veterans of a dozen campaigns, warriors who had earned their place in Warlord Thaxmore's personal assault force. But they had never fought on a human-designed space station. Team Alpha, engage, Marcus ordered. The security team hiding in the maintenance passages above Docking Bay 7 opened fire with coordinated precision. Plasma bolts and explosive charges rained down on the Dracari troops, who found themselves caught in a crossfire with no clear escape route. The alien superior armor and training kept them alive longer than normal soldiers would have survived, but they were fighting at a tactical disadvantage that negated many of their strengths. Half the assault team was down within the first minute of combat. First enemy wave neutralized in Docking Bay 7. Cordith reported with satisfaction, moving to secondary positions as planned. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when Thaxmore realized that conventional assault tactics weren't working and adapted his strategy accordingly. Second wave incoming, the sensor operator announced. Larger craft, different approach vectors. Marcus frowned as he studied the new contacts. These ships weren't assault pods designed for quick insertion. They were heavy transports, the kind used to deliver siege equipment and specialized warfare units. "Commander," he called to Brixton, "I need you to coordinate the evacuation of the remaining civilians. Get them to the deepest, most secure areas of the station. What about the defensive positions?" "Leave those to me," Marcus replied grimly. "Thaxmore is escalating faster than I expected. He's not just bringing Marines anymore." The second wave of boarding craft attacked with overwhelming force, targeting every major docking facility simultaneously. Instead of trying to establish small beachheads, they were attempting to flood the station with troops and secure large areas through sheer numbers. Marcus watched the tactical display as red icons representing enemy forces spread throughout Nexus Prime like a virus. His defensive teams were fighting bravely, but they were being pushed back from one position after another. "Captain," Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled through the communication system. "We have wounded coming into Medical Station 3. Dracari weapons. The damage is severe." Marcus felt a familiar cold rage settle over him as he processed the medical reports. Dracari military doctrine emphasized the use of weapons that caused maximum trauma, not just to eliminate enemies, but to terrorize survivors. They used plasma charges that burned through armor and flesh alike, leaving wounds that were designed to be as horrific as they were lethal. "Doctor, implement Protocol 7, Marcus instructed. Save who you can, but don't risk your medical teams trying to treat hopeless cases." It was a brutal calculation, the kind of decision that would haunt him later, but it was necessary. In a battle like this, medical resources had to be allocated to the people who could actually be saved. Third wave launching. The sensor operator reported, "Sir, these readings don't match any known Dracari assault craft." Marcus studied the new contacts with growing concern. The ships approaching the station were smaller than the previous waves, but their energy signatures were completely different. Instead of the conventional plasma drives used by most Dracari vessels, these craft showed the distinctive pattern of stealth technology. "Infiltration units," he muttered. "Thaxmore is sending specialists." This was what Marcus had been most worried about. The Dracari commander wasn't just trying to overwhelm the station's defenses. He was deploying surgical strike teams designed to eliminate key personnel and disable critical systems from within. Marcus activated his personal communication device and switched to a secure military frequency. "All team leaders, priority Alpha. Enemy infiltration units inbound. Initiate lockdown protocols immediately." Throughout the station, emergency bulkheads slammed shut as Marcus's modified control systems isolated critical areas. The power grid reconfigured itself to cut off access to sensitive systems, while automated defenses came online in areas that had previously been considered secure. The Dracari infiltrators were about to discover that their target had teeth they hadn't expected. But Marcus couldn't coordinate the defense from the command center much longer. The main assault forces were getting closer to their position, and it was only a matter of time before they broke through the outer defensive lines. "Commander Brixton," he called to the Corvin officer. "I'm transferring tactical command back to you. Continue the evacuation and maintain defensive positions as long as possible." "Where are you going?" Brixton demanded. Marcus checked his weapon systems and gathered his equipment. "I'm going to remind Warlord Thaxmore why he spent the last 2 years thinking I was dead." The maintenance passages that Marcus had used for 2 years as a janitor became a highway to war as he moved through the hidden arteries of Nexus Prime. His enhanced reflexes and tactical implants painted a three-dimensional picture of the battle raging around him, showing enemy positions, friendly forces, and the constantly shifting front lines of the conflict. Marcus's first target was an infiltration team that had breached the station's computer core. According to his intelligence network, a 4-person Drakari unit was attempting to slice into the main database and download strategic information about human defensive capabilities. He found them exactly where his analysis had predicted, clustered around a bank of quantum processors while their technical specialists worked to bypass the security protocols. They were professionals, maintaining proper watch rotation and covering all approaches to their position. All approaches except the one that led through the environmental systems. Marcus dropped through a ventilation shaft directly into the middle of the enemy team. His plasma rifle spoke 4 times in rapid succession, each shot finding its target with the precision that had made him legendary among Special Forces units. The infiltrators were dead before they had time to raise an alarm. But killing the infiltration team was only the first step. Marcus quickly accessed their portable computer systems and began feeding false information back to their command structure. Instead of accurate intelligence about human defenses, Warlord Thaxmore would receive data suggesting that the station's critical systems were located in heavily defended areas that were actually secondary targets. Marcus's second target was more ambitious, a heavy weapons team that had set up position in one of the main corridors and was systematically destroying the defensive strongpoints that protected the civilian evacuation routes. The Drakari had positioned their weapon emplacement perfectly, with clear fields of fire and multiple escape routes if they needed to relocate. Their heavy plasma cannon could punch through bulkheads and defensive barriers like they were made of paper, and they were using it to methodically eliminate anything that stood between them and their objectives. Marcus studied their position for several minutes, analyzing their defensive setup and looking for weaknesses. The weapon emplacement was professionally constructed, but it had one flaw that its creators probably hadn't considered. It was designed to defend against attacks from the front and sides, but not from directly above. Marcus made his way through the maintenance shafts until he was positioned directly over the enemy weapon team. Working carefully, he placed shaped charges on the structural supports that held up the ceiling section above their position. When the charges detonated, 3 tons of reinforced metal and debris crashed down on the Drakari heavy weapons position. The aliens never knew what hit them, but Marcus's third target was the one that mattered most. According to the intelligence he was gathering from his network of sensors and communication intercepts, Warlord Thaxmore himself had boarded the station. The Drakari commander was leading an elite assault team toward the command center, personally overseeing the operation that would give him control of Nexus Prime. Marcus began moving through the station toward the command section, using every shortcut and hidden passage he had learned during his 2 years as a maintenance worker. His enhanced reflexes guided him past enemy patrols and through areas where the fighting was heaviest. As he moved, he began to understand the full scope of Thaxmore's strategy. This wasn't just an attack on a space station. It was a demonstration, a message sent to every species in the galaxy about what happened when they dared to resist Drakari expansion. The alien warlord was using Nexus Prime as a testing ground for tactics and weapons that would be employed in the larger war he was planning. Every defensive measure Marcus had implemented, every successful counterattack by the station's security forces was being analyzed and cataloged for future reference, which meant that Marcus couldn't just defend the station. He had to make sure that Warlord Thaxmore didn't live to use the intelligence he was gathering. Marcus reached the outer perimeter of the command section to find it under siege by a force of Drakari assault troops. The aliens had established firing positions in the surrounding corridors and were systematically destroying the defensive barriers that protected the most critical area of the station. Commander Brixton and his remaining security forces were holding their positions, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. It was only a matter of time before the Drakari broke through and seized control of Nexus Prime's command systems. Marcus activated his communication device and contacted the command center directly. "Commander, this is Captain Chun. I need you to open emergency access Portal Gamma 7 in exactly 60 seconds. "Captain, that portal leads directly into the command center," Brixton protested. "If the Drakari get through, they won't," Marcus interrupted. "Trust me." He spent the next minute positioning himself in the maintenance shaft that connected to emergency access Portal Gamma 7. When the portal opened, Marcus would have a direct line of sight into the command center and access to the Drakari forces attacking it. More importantly, he would have the element of surprise. "Portal opening in 10 seconds, Brixton announced. Marcus chambered a fresh power cell in his plasma rifle and activated his tactical implants. The enhanced reflexes and targeting systems that had been surgically implanted during his Special Forces training came online, turning him into something more than human, something designed specifically for situations like this. The emergency portal slid open, and Marcus erupted from the maintenance shaft like an avenging angel. His first shots took out the Drakari heavy weapons specialists who had been preparing to breach the command center's main defenses. His targeting system identified priority threats and guided his rifle with mechanical precision, each plasma bolt finding its mark despite the chaos and confusion of the firefight. The Drakari assault troops turned to face this new threat, but Marcus was already moving. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge their return fire while maintaining his own accuracy, and his knowledge of the station's layout gave him advantages they couldn't match. In less than 30 seconds, Marcus had eliminated an entire assault squad and driven the survivors back from their positions around the command center. "Command center is secure," he reported to Brixton, "but this is just the beginning. Thaxmore is coming personally, and when he gets here, things are going to get very interesting." Marcus reloaded his weapon and checked his remaining ammunition. The hardest part of the battle was still ahead of him, but for the first time since the attack began, he felt like they might actually have a chance. Warlord Thaxmore was about to learn that Captain Marcus Chun hadn't spent the last 2 years hiding from his problems. He had been preparing for this moment, waiting for the chance to settle an old score. The galaxy's most dangerous predator was about to become the prey. The station's corridors fell eerily quiet as Warlord Thaxmore made his personal approach to the command center. Marcus monitored the alien commander's progress through his network of sensors, watching as the most feared military mind in the galaxy moved through Nexus Prime like a force of nature. Thaxmore wasn't rushing. He was methodical, systematic, personally inspecting the aftermath of each battle his forces had fought. Marcus realized that the Drakari commander was conducting a real-time analysis of human defensive tactics, studying how his enemies had adapted to circumstances they had never been trained for. "Captain," Commander Brixton's voice was tense with strain. "Our perimeter teams report that the enemy has stopped advancing. They're consolidating their positions and establishing supply lines." Marcus frowned as he processed this information. That wasn't typical Drakari behavior. Their military doctrine emphasized speed and overwhelming force, not careful positioning and logistics planning. "He's changed his strategy," Marcus muttered. "Thaxmore isn't trying to take the station quickly anymore. He's treating this as an extended siege. What does that mean for us?" Before Marcus could answer, his communication device crackled with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was one he had been expecting, but it still sent a chill down his spine. "Captain Chun." Warlord Thaxmore's words carried across the station's emergency communication network. I believe it is time we concluded our unfinished business. Marcus activated his transmitter. I am listening. You have fought well, the Drakari commander acknowledged. Better than I expected, given your limited resources. But we both know how this must end. I am prepared to offer terms. Terms. Marcus couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. Indeed, you will surrender yourself to me, alone and unarmed. In exchange, I will allow the remaining civilians to evacuate safely. You have my word as a warrior that they will not be pursued or harmed. Marcus felt every eye in the command center turn toward him. The offer was tempting, almost irresistible. Thousands of innocent lives in exchange for his own death. It was the kind of bargain that any honorable soldier would consider. But Marcus knew Warlord Thaxmore better than that. And after I surrender? He asked. Thaxmore's laugh was like breaking glass. You will provide me with a final demonstration of human resilience before your eventual death. I am curious to see how long you can maintain your defiance under properly applied pressure. Translation: torture. Long, elaborate, scientifically designed torture meant to break his will and prove Drakari superiority over human weakness. It would be recorded, broadcast, and used as propaganda to demoralize other species that might consider resisting the Imperium's expansion. I appreciate the offer, Marcus replied calmly. But I have a counter-proposal. Oh, Marcus smiled grimly as he activated the final phase of the preparations he had been making for 2 years. Hidden throughout Nexus Prime, buried in maintenance systems and power conduits, a network of modifications he had installed during his time as a janitor came online. You want to finish our fight? Come and finish it. But you come alone, Thaxmore. Just you and me. No backup, no support. Winner takes the station. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Marcus began to wonder if the transmission had been cut. When Thaxmore finally responded, his voice carried a note of genuine interest. Single combat? How primitive. And yet, there's a certain appeal to the concept. Unless you're afraid, Marcus added casually. Another pause, shorter this time. Very well, Captain Shun. I accept your challenge. But understand that when I kill you, my forces will show no mercy to the survivors. This gesture of yours will accomplish nothing except providing me with personal satisfaction. We'll see, Marcus replied, and cut the transmission. Commander Brixton stared at him in shock. Captain, you can't be serious. That creature is the greatest warrior in Drakari space. He's never lost a single combat. Neither had I, Marcus reminded him. Until 2 years ago, Marcus began final preparations for what would either be the last battle of his life or the beginning of the end for Warlord Thaxmore. He checked his weapons, reviewed his tactical implant status, and accessed the station modifications he had spent months installing. Sir, Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the communication system. Medical stations report that casualty rates have dropped significantly. Whatever you did to disrupt their assault patterns, it's working. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction at the news. His guerrilla tactics had forced the Drakari to adapt to unfamiliar conditions, reducing their effectiveness and buying time for the evacuation efforts. But none of that would matter if he lost the coming fight. All stations, he announced. This is Captain Shun. In approximately 15 minutes, I will be engaging Warlord Thaxmore in single combat in the Central Plaza. All personnel are ordered to maintain defensive positions and continue evacuation procedures regardless of the outcome. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. If I fall, remember that you are not defeated. You are defenders of everything that makes civilization worth preserving. Fight for each other, protect the innocent, and never surrender to those who would make the galaxy a darker place. Marcus left the command center and made his way through the maintenance passages toward the Central Plaza, the largest open area on Nexus Prime. It was where the station's various species gathered for cultural celebrations and diplomatic receptions, a symbol of the cooperation and mutual respect that the Drakari Imperium sought to destroy. It seemed fitting that the battle would end there. As he moved through the familiar corridors, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been a broken soldier fleeing from the guilt of losing his entire unit. He had come to Nexus Prime looking for peace, for anonymity, for a chance to forget the weight of command and the cost of leadership. Instead, he had found purpose. The beings who lived and worked on this station weren't soldiers, but they had fought with courage that would have made his old unit proud. They had trusted him, followed his orders, and proven that the strength to resist tyranny existed in every species if given proper leadership and support. Marcus reached the central plaza to find it empty, except for one figure waiting in the center of the vast space. Warlord Thaxmore stood motionless, his massive frame encased in the black battle armor that had become a symbol of terror throughout the galaxy. Ancient weapons hung from his belt, trophies taken from defeated enemies across a dozen worlds. The Drakari commander was impressive to behold, a perfect synthesis of predatory grace and mechanical precision. His reptilian features showed the scars of countless battles, while his yellow eyes held the cold intelligence of someone who had never met a tactical problem he couldn't solve. But Marcus had spent 2 years studying those same tactical patterns, learning how Thaxmore thought, understanding the psychological framework that drove the galaxy's most dangerous military mind. Captain Chun, Thaxmore acknowledged him with something that might have been respect. You look different than when we last met. Marcus drew his plasma rifle and checked the power cell one final time. 2 years of peace will change a man. Indeed, you seem calmer, more focused. I confess I am curious to see how grief has shaped you as a warrior. They began to circle each other slowly, two apex predators sizing up their opponent and looking for weakness or opportunity. Marcus felt his tactical implants come fully online, flooding his nervous system with combat stimulants and enhanced reflexes. But more than that, he felt the weight of every life aboard Nexus Prime, every being who was counting on him to succeed where conventional military force had failed. Your guerrilla tactics were quite impressive, Thaxmore continued conversationally. Asymmetric warfare, denial of resources, psychological pressure applied to disrupt command structures. You have learned much since our last encounter. I had good teachers, Marcus replied. Dead friends have a way of focusing the mind. Thaxmore's laugh was genuinely amused. And now you seek revenge? How wonderfully primitive. I had hoped you would prove more evolved than that. Not revenge, Marcus corrected. Justice. The first exchange of fire came without warning, both warriors moving within human speed as their weapon systems came online. Plasma bolts seared the air between them, each shot calculated to exploit perceived weaknesses in their opponent's positioning. But Marcus had an advantage that Thaxmore couldn't have anticipated. For 2 years, he had lived and worked in every corner of Nexus Prime. He knew every sight line, every piece of cover, every structural weakness that could be exploited. More importantly, he had spent months preparing for this exact confrontation. As they fought across the plaza, Marcus led Thaxmore through a carefully choreographed pattern that triggered the modifications he had embedded in the station's systems. Environmental controls shifted atmospheric pressure in subtle ways that affected the Drakari's breathing. Gravity generators created minor fluctuations that threw off his opponent's timing. Lighting systems strobed in patterns designed to disrupt reptilian visual processing. None of the effects were dramatic enough to be obvious, but together they created a cumulative disadvantage that began to tell as the battle progressed. Thaxmore was the superior warrior in every conventional sense. His reflexes were faster, his armor was stronger, and his weapons were more advanced. But Marcus was fighting on terrain he had been preparing for years, using tactics specifically designed to counter Drakari advantages. Clever, Thaxmore acknowledged as he realized what was happening. You have turned the entire station into a weapon. I learned from the best, Marcus replied, triggering another series of environmental adjustments. You taught me that victory belongs to whoever adapts fastest to changing conditions. The battle raged across the plaza and into the surrounding corridors, both warriors using every advantage they could find. Thaxmore's superior equipment kept him in the fight despite Marcus's environmental advantages, while Marcus's knowledge of the terrain allowed him to stay mobile and avoid the killing blows that would have ended the combat instantly. But as the minutes passed, Marcus began to realize that his preparations weren't enough. Thaxmore was adapting to the environmental conditions faster than Marcus had anticipated, and the Drakari commander's raw physical superiority was starting to tell. Marcus ducked behind a structural support as a plasma blast scorched the air where his head had been a moment before. His armor was showing multiple impact points, and his weapon's power cell was down to less than 20% charge. Thaxmore, meanwhile, showed only minor battle damage despite the prolonged firefight. "You fight well for a defeated enemy," the Drakari commander called out. "But we both know how this must end. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." Marcus checked his remaining ammunition and felt his enhanced reflexes calculating angles and distances. He had one chance left, one gambit that might turn the tide of the battle. But it would require sacrificing everything he had built over the past 2 years. "You're right," Marcus called back. "This does have to end." He activated the final modification he had made to Nexus Prime systems, the one he had hoped never to use. Throughout the station, emergency bulkheads began sealing, atmospheric systems switched to emergency mode, and power grids reconfigured themselves according to protocols that existed nowhere in the official documentation. Nexus Prime was transforming itself from a diplomatic station into something else entirely, something that reflected its builder's true nature and capabilities. "What are you doing?" Thaxmore demanded as he felt the station's systems responding to commands he couldn't understand. Marcus stepped out from behind cover, his weapon aimed directly at the Drakari commander's center mass. "I'm showing you who we really are." The lights in the plaza shifted to emergency illumination, bathing everything in the red glow the human warships used during battle stations. The atmospheric composition changed subtly, increasing oxygen content to levels that enhanced human performance while making Drakari breathing more difficult. Most importantly, the artificial gravity began fluctuating in patterns that matched the training protocols used by Terran Special Forces. Marcus felt his body respond to conditions it had been engineered to recognize, his enhanced physiology adapting to combat parameters that had been burned into his nervous system through years of brutal preparation. Thaxmore, meanwhile, found himself fighting in an environment that was becoming increasingly hostile to his species' biological needs. "Impossible," the Drakari commander breathed as he realized what was happening. "This is a civilian station. It cannot have military-grade environmental controls." "It wasn't a civilian station when I started working here," Marcus replied. "It was a human station that we opened to other species as a gesture of goodwill. The military systems were never removed, just hidden." He fired his weapon as he spoke, the plasma bolt taking Thaxmore in the shoulder and spinning him around. The Drakari commander's return fire went wide as the changing environmental conditions affected his aim. "For 2 years, I've been preparing for this moment," Marcus continued, advancing steadily as his opponent struggled to adapt to the hostile conditions. "Learning your tactics, studying your weaknesses, building a trap specifically designed to exploit everything I know about how you think and fight." Thaxmore raised his weapon for a final shot, but Marcus was already moving. His enhanced reflexes, boosted by the combat-optimized environment, allowed him to close the distance before the Drakari commander could react. The final exchange was brutal and personal, 2 warriors locked in hand-to-hand combat that would determine the fate of everyone aboard Nexus Prime. Thaxmore's superior strength was offset by the environmental conditions that favored human physiology, while Marcus's tactical implants gave him split-second advantages that accumulated into decisive superiority. When it ended, Warlord Thaxmore lay motionless on the deck of the central plaza, defeated by an enemy he had underestimated for the last time. Marcus activated his communication device with hands that shook from exhaustion and combat stimulants. "All stations, this is Captain Shun. Warlord Thaxmore is dead. I repeat, The enemy commander has been eliminated. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Throughout Nexus Prime, the voices of dozens of different species erupted in celebration as they realized that the seemingly impossible had happened. The galaxy's most feared military commander had been defeated by a human soldier fighting to protect the innocent. But Marcus knew the battle wasn't over yet. Commander Brixton, he called to the command center. What's the status of the Drakari fleet? Sir, the Corvin officer's voice was thick with emotion. Long-range sensors show the enemy ships withdrawing from the system. Without their commander, they appear to be returning to Drakari space. Marcus nodded wearily. That matched what he knew about Drakari command structure. Without Thaxmore's personal leadership, the fleet commanders would be unwilling to continue an operation that had already cost them significant casualties. Begin damage assessment and casualty reports, he ordered, and give me a connection to Earth Command. They need to know what happened here. As the immediate crisis passed, Marcus found himself facing a different kind of reckoning. His identity as a simple maintenance worker was completely destroyed. Everyone aboard Nexus Prime now knew that Captain Marcus Chun was alive, and that knowledge would spread throughout the galaxy within hours. The peaceful life he had built for himself was over, replaced by the weight of command and the responsibility that came with being one of the most capable military officers in human space. Dr. Tanaka appeared in the plaza as Marcus was securing Thaxmore's weapons as evidence. The elderly scientist looked at the defeated Drakari commander, then at Marcus, and shook his head in amazement. 2 years, he said quietly. For 2 years, I thought I was friends with a janitor. Marcus managed a tired smile. You were friends with a janitor. That part was real. And now? Marcus looked around at the station that had become his home, at the beings who had trusted him with their lives, at the proof that cooperation and determination could triumph over even the galaxy's darkest forces. Now I'm exactly who I've always been, he replied. Someone who believes that the strong have an obligation to protect those who can't protect themselves. Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. The galaxy could use more people like that. As rescue teams began arriving from human space and other allied systems, Marcus reflected on the lessons of the past day. He had tried to run from his responsibility, to find peace in anonymity and simple work. But some obligations transcended personal choice. The beings of Nexus Prime had reminded him that leadership wasn't about rank or recognition. It was about standing up when standing up was needed, fighting when fighting was necessary, and making the hard choices that preserved everything worth preserving. Marcus Chun had been trying to hide from who he was for 2 years. Instead, he had discovered who he was meant to become. The janitor was gone, but in his place stood something better. A protector who understood the true cost of peace and was willing to pay it whenever the price was demanded. In the days that followed, as Nexus Prime rebuilt and the galaxy learned about the battle that had taken place there, a new legend was born. Not just the story of a military victory, but the story of what happened when ordinary people were given extraordinary leadership. The Drakari Imperium would think twice before targeting civilian populations again, knowing that humanity had demonstrated its willingness and ability to defend the innocent against impossible odds. And throughout the galaxy, in quiet places where humble people did humble work, beings began to wonder if perhaps they too might be capable of more than they had ever imagined. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. And sometimes that's exactly what the galaxy needs.